The 2023 legislative session is over, thankfully. And a lot of bad stuff happened. We'll save that for another day, another video. Today we want to focus on what are the top 10 wins of the 2023 legislative session. A lot of good things happened. I'm Connor Boyack with Libertas Institute, and our team was up there to help make a lot of these successes happen. So without further ado, let's jump right in. Top of the list, of course, is House Bill 215. This created the Utah Fits All Scholarship, empowering families to get up to $8,000 per child to take to a private school to use for homeschooling. So a lot of these families can receive back the taxes that they're paying into the education system and instead use them for other purposes for their kids, different types of alternative education. This is a long time coming, big coalition of people helping us work on this. So we're very excited by this because this is going to allow a lot of families to find better educational options because one size doesn't fit all. So it's going to take about a year for this program to get up and running, and then the scholarships will start fall 2024. Second on the list is House Bill 57. This was sponsored by Representative Wilcox, and this put restrictions on what are called geofence warrants. For example, you've heard of January 6th. Who hasn't heard of January 6th? Well, the way that the government was able to track down everyone who was there and go investigate and interrogate and arrest many of them was what's called a geofence, where they literally drew a map around the Capitol and they gave it to Verizon or Google and they said, tell us everyone whose devices were there on this particular day during this particular time. Effectively, this is historical surveillance because these companies keep data on your location for the past forever how long you've had your device. So this radically empowers the government to go snoop into where people have been in the past. What we did with House Bill 57 was create the first law in the entire country limiting how law enforcement can use these geofence warrants, requiring reporting, really hampering the ability of government to have unrestrained access to this type of information. So now we're going to go help other states pass this law as well, and that's House Bill 57. Third on the list is one of our favorite topics, micro-entrepreneurship. We're talking about House Bill 408, sponsored by Representative Spenlove. And what this bill did is it took our successes with food trucks. We've gotten food truck freedom laws passed, first of their kind in the country, where we knocked down all kinds of local regulations and permits and business licenses. These food trucks were having to get one license and inspection in a city, and then when they go to a new city, they'd have to do it all over again. And so it was really hampering their business model. We cleared all of that out of the way with food trucks. We have the best law in the country now. House Bill 408 took that same concept and now apply it to any of the other kind of mobile business. So there's mobile cell phone companies where you can step onto a truck and you can buy a cell phone from them. There's mobile massage parlors where they'll drive up to a business in their truck and you can get kind of like you see at the airport, little quick massages. There's mobile libraries, there's mobile salons where you could go get a haircut inside one of these trucks. So we've basically taken that same model from the food truck law and applied it to all these other mobile businesses so that Utah now and continues to be the best state in the country for this type of mobile micro-entrepreneurship. Number 4 deals with the gig economy. You have your Uber driver, your DoorDash delivery guy, all these newfangled ways for people to earn money from these various gigs. The problem is that as independent contractors, they're not able to get a lot of benefits like a traditional employee does. And if the companies, the apps, the platforms were able to provide them those types of benefits, it would classify them as employees instead. They'd have to pay all these extra taxes. And so a lot of these people don't want that. They like the flexibility of being a gig worker, but they do want benefits. So what this bill does, with the leadership of Senator Johnson passing this through, is it allows these companies to create what's called a portable benefits plan, basically mimicking some of the benefits that W-2 employees can receive from their employer, but allowing these gig workers to be able to have access to those types of plans that as they leave, driving for Lyft or doing something with Postmates, they can keep that plan. It's not tied to an employer. It's their own plan that the companies can contribute into without running afoul of employment law and having to pay all these other taxes. This is the first law of its kind in the country, and like with the geofence warrant and so many other policies that we've innovated in Utah, we're now going to go help other states try and get this law passed as well. Number 5 is Senate Bill 81, sponsored by Senator Fillmore. This enhances a law that we got passed with Senator Fillmore last year to help seniors better deal with their property taxes. A lot of seniors on low income or a fixed income are house rich, but cash poor. And so as the surrounding environment gets built out, leading to an increase in property taxes, a lot of these senior citizens are kind of trapped in their homes. Some of them can't afford their property tax bill because they lack the money to pay for it. So with last year's bill and now with Senate Bill 81 fixing some of the technical issues and enhancing the program, senior citizens are going to be able to stay in their home, and the property taxes that they're required to pay will just be saved up and paid for later when they pass on and the house is sold to someone else, or at any time while they're still alive and the house is sold. During that settlement and that sale is when the property taxes can be dealt with. So this lets individuals, fixed income, senior citizens, stay in their home and not be punished and kicked out of their home simply because they can't afford property taxes. Number 6 deals with peer-to-peer car sharing. Have you ever used an app called Turo? There's others like it. We broke the story a few years ago about how these drivers were being punished. So the way this works is people were flying into Salt Lake International Airport and they would go meet the owner of a car at curbside from whom they were going to rent their car. Turo and other apps, they're like Airbnb but for vehicles, where you can rent your vehicle to someone else. And so these people were being ticketed at roadside. It's like, welcome to Utah, here's your citation. And so we broke the story, and there's a lot of buzz that happened in the wake of that. Since that time, these companies and the rental car companies, their incumbent competition, have been negotiating, trying to haggle and figure out a deal, which now passed this session as Senate Bill 121, sponsored by Senator McKell. One of the chief problems has been rental car companies had a sweet deal where they didn't have to pay taxes up front on purchasing their fleet of vehicles. They would just pay taxes per rental car transaction. But for Turo and other apps like it, the individual who owns that car had to pay all the taxes up front when buying the car, and then they still have to pay taxes. So that it was a double taxation issue. That's now been resolved. Senate Bill 121 passed. So now we got more of a fair and open playing field for some of these companies against the rental car competition. Number 7. What happens when a police officer is being investigated potentially for corruption or excessive use of force, and they choose to quit rather than face that investigation and go seek employment at another law enforcement agency? Well, before this session, that was happening, and the new police chief at the new agency would have no reason to go look into the investigation of the previous one because there were never any findings or conclusion because things were kind of stopped. So Senate Bill 124, sponsored by Senator Escamilla, puts a stop to that and requires the police chief at the new agency to go investigate and look into why that individual quit, if there was an open investigation, if there were any allegations and things like that. It also sets up kind of an early warning system to be able to make sure that this type of problem with police officers and law enforcement officials is investigated and dealt with up front rather than allowing them to move between agency and get away from being investigated. So Senate Bill 124, really good for transparency and protecting due process to make sure that law enforcement officials are being held accountable where appropriate for potentially breaking the law. Number 8. A few years ago, with the legislature's help, we passed the nation's strongest privacy law to make sure that data on your phone, your computer, your device is locked down with a warrant. But that law said that there are a number of judicially recognized exceptions to getting a warrant. For example, if officers are chasing someone into a home, a criminal, they don't have to stop and get a warrant to go into that home. That's called a hot pursuit exception. There's a number of these exceptions, including a vehicle exception, because the courts have held that if you're driving along the side of the road, you don't have the same expectation of privacy in your vehicle than you do in your home. The problem is that when it comes to your phone, it's tracking your location. Well, what about your car? If you have a Tesla or other electric vehicles, increasingly these types of cars are collecting and storing information about you, whether on the car itself or up in the cloud. So Senate Bill 226, sponsored by Senator Weiler, locks this down. Makes sure that your location privacy and your data that is inside the car or uploaded to another service is protected by a warrant. Number 9 deals with ketamine, a drug primarily used for anesthesia, but it has an off-label use for dealing with mental illness. A lot of people successfully use this to deal with their depression or anxiety. There are ketamine clinics throughout the state that are providing this service to patients very successfully. But before this session, the law required someone be physically in the room with the individual at all time who had a specialized type of medical training. This really increases the cost for patients because this is not a risky drug. It's been used extremely successfully. There's basically no adverse effects at all. And so it was just adding to people's bills to basically have this medically trained person there. So Senate Bill 197, sponsored by Senator Kennedy, opens up or deregulates this process a little bit. Now someone just has to be in the building or nearby who has this medical type of training, so that a practitioner, for example, could have 10 patients at once all using ketamine, and they just have one person there just in case of something happening. So a really important bill that's going to help a lot of people by reducing a lot of costs for getting this type of mental illness treatment that they need. Last but certainly not least is Senate Bill 36, sponsored by Senator Bramble, dealing with occupational licensure. We've worked on a number of licensure policies over the years, as you all know, I'm sure. This is the area of law where the government requires someone to get a permission slip before being able to engage in their chosen occupation. Now, the problem has been, despite all the reforms that have been made in past years with our involvement and a coalition of many other organizations and legislators, is that there was this part of the law that said for various professions you needed to have good moral character and similar type of wording that was just abstract and vague. And what it would do is it would empower the bureaucrat to say to someone, I don't think you have good moral character. Where this was really applied was to ex-convicts, people who went to jail, they did their time, they came out, they're trying to rebuild their life and not recidivate, not, break the law and go back to prison, for example. They're trying to get a job, and let's say they're a carpenter or they're a barber, I don't know. However, if these bureaucrats were empowered to be like, oh, no, you're a former criminal, we don't think you have good moral character, they can basically deny them from going into their chosen profession. So Senate Bill 36 clears a lot of this out, makes sure that these bureaucrats and government employees are not empowered to discriminate against people this way who are trying to rebuild their lives and serve their community just because of something they did in the past. And that's a wrap. 10 of the best, not the entire list of the best, and certainly didn't include the worst ones. If you would like to see the full list of the best and the worst bills of the 2023 legislative session, or if you would like to see how your representative or senator voted, head to libertas.org/2023. You'll see the full voting index. You can see how everyone voted on all these important bills. You can learn little summaries about each bill. Go talk to your elected officials, praise them for the good things that happen, and let's encourage them to do a lot more good stuff, because this was an awesome list. We've got a lot of fun ideas for the next legislative session, but in the meantime, head to libertas.org/2023 to see the full index.